Hello, dear students. Very warm welcome in the class. In the previous class, we were reading the chapter. We started the chapter Globalization, chapter number 9. And this chapter is of contemporary world politics, last chapter. Very interesting chapter this is. Yesterday, we discussed that what we mean by globalization. So we mean the interlinking of the world's economy. The process is known as the globalization. Globalization also has many positives as well as few negatives. With the first topic, that was the concept of globalization, we saw three examples. Example of Janardhan, example of Ramdhari, and another example, in which we saw that example of Sarika, in which we saw that how globalization is changing the circumstances in the world, where you see you are buying a particular product that is not manufactured in your country, that is like manufactured in somewhere else, distant apart, thousands of kilometers away from your area. Still, you are buying that product, and that is affordable to you. That fulfills the needs of you. So that's very interesting aspect of the globalization. And with the example, very interesting example, we saw the example of Janardhan, in which we saw that how, like being Indian, you are just going to a call center at night, working in US shift, and Janardhan became John. Very interesting है, Janardhan John बन गया. वहां पे कॉल सेंटर में जाना कि वही जनार्दन जो है जॉन के नाम से वर्क करता है एंड सॉल्विंग द प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ द कस्टमर्स हु आर देयर thousands of kilometers away from our country in America. So this is also very positive aspect of the globalization. Another example we saw that how example of Sarika, that how with the globalization opportunities are also like getting bigger and bigger, and that's how persons are getting the benefits of it. So these all are the aspects of the globalization. However, we saw some negative aspects of the globalization also. And what are those? Simple, like competition. Because as the globalization is happening, as the MNCs, multinational corporations, big corporations, they have huge money. They are coming in our country. They are coming in going across the countries, working across the countries. So therefore, the local market, local traders, or local businessmen, local manufacturers, they are facing the problem because they cannot compete with the huge MNCs. So that's how the things are like happening. Even we see some things which are like against the local businesses with the MNCs, with the coming of MNCs, with the rapid integration of the economies. This problem is faced by the local traders. Now, next everyone. So we saw the multi-dimensional concept. That's what we read in our previous class. Now today we're gonna discuss first the causes of the globalization. Now, what are the causes of the globalization? What accounts for globalization? What are the reasons? So as you all know that globalization is the flow of four important things. And what are those four important things? Ideas, capital, commodities, and people. Because the integration process has been started, and with that the movement of the people, the movement of the ideas, the movement of the commodities and capital, that has become very smooth, in a very fast scale, in a very fast manner. The movement is happening. So globalization is the flows of ideas, capital, commodities, and people. If it is perhaps logical to ask if there is anything novel about this phenomenon. Globalization, in terms of these four flows, has taken place through much of human history. However, those who argue that there is something distinct about contemporary globalization point out that it is the scale. Because earlier also, like if we go back in history, if being student of humanity, you all must know that even in Harappan civilization, that is like 5,000 years ago, even at that time, the people who used to be like, they used to trade with distant lands. There also used to be the flow of commodities, the flow of even the people, the flow of the ideas also used to be there. हिस्ट्री में अगर पुराने टाइम में हम चले तो आइडियाज का फ्लो भी होता था. बड़े बड़े स्कॉलर्स एक कंट्री से दूसरी कंट्री में मूव होते थे. तो सर फिर ग्लोबलाइजेशन क्या उस टाइम में भी था? हिस्ट्री में भी अगर हम बात करें तो कैन यू से दैट वो जो, अगर हम सिर्फ ग्लोबलाइजेशन को ये माने कि फ्लो है इन चीजों का, तो फ्लो तो इन चीजों का आज से हजारों साल पहले भी होता था. राजाओं महाराजाओं के टाइम में, उस टाइम में भी तो होता था. तो क्या सर वो भी ग्लोबलाइजेशन था? यही हम समझ रहे हैं और यहाँ पे यही आर्गुमेंट देते हैं कि कंटेम्परेरी जो ग्लोबलाइजेशन है, It point out that it is the scale and speed of these flows. कि सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट क्या चेंज हुआ है, अगर पुराने टाइम में अगर फ्लो इन चीजों का होता था और आज इन्हीं चीजों का फ्लो होता है, उसमें चेंज बस ये हुआ है कि अब रैपिड स्केल पे फ्लो होता है ना, इन लाइक इन वेरी फास्ट मैनर. सो द स्पीड, द स्केल, कितने बड़े स्केल पे और कितनी बड़ी स्पीड में जो फ्लो हो रहा है, दैट अकाउंट फॉर द यूनिकनेस ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन. So that's how you can differ the globalization in the earlier time period and the globalization which is happening today. जो process, उसमें जो movement है इन 4 चीजों का जो अभी हमने देखा, ideas, capital, commodities and people, वो अब बड़े scale पे हो रहा है. So this is the uniqueness of globalization in the contemporary era. Now globalization has a strong historical basis, as we have already discussed that पहले भी तो भाई ये सारे movements तो होते थे. And it is important to view contemporary flows against this backdrop. So आज के टाइम में और पहले के टाइम में क्या डिफरेंस हुआ है, that is also very important to understand and to know. Now, while globalization is not caused by any single factor, अब ग्लोबलाइजेशन के लिए कोई एक सिंगल फैक्टर रिस्पॉन्सिबल नहीं है, बहुत सारे फैक्टर है. नाउ दिस क्वेश्चन कैन बी आस्क्ड फ्रॉम यू, ओके सर हम एक चीज समझ गए कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन में आपने कहा ये पहले भी होता था हिस्ट्री में, और बिल्कुल सही है. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर हम ग्लोबलाइजेशन को फ्लो माने, आइडियाज का, कमोडिटीज का, पीपल का, तो ये तो पहले भी होता था. लेकिन आज में और पहले में डिफरेंस हम ये भी समझ गए कि स्केल और फास्ट मैनर में होता है. बट क्या रीजन है इसके? नाउ व्हाट आर द रीजंस व्हाई द मूवमेंट इज हैपनिंग इन दैट मच वाइड स्केल और इन अ वेरी फास्ट मैनर? वो जो डेवलपमेंट हुए हैं, वो जो इवोल्यूशन हुआ है, वही इसके कॉजेज हैं, किसके? ग्लोबलाइजेशन के. तो पहला इंपॉर्टेंट, जो कम्युनिकेशन के अंदर आप देखिए कितना नई नई इन्वेंशंस, इवोल्यूशंस, कितनी डेवलपमेंट हुई है. आज से आप लाइक इफ यू गो बैक इवन 100 years ago, कोई कौन सोच सकता था ऐसे बैठे बैठे जो है यहां से बैठे हम वीडियो कॉलिंग करेंगे. ये इवोल्यूशन ही हुआ था ना, साइंस ने आपको ये चीज दी है. हर चीज का एक इवोल्यूशन होता है, डेवलपमेंट होती है. सो आज कम्युनिकेशन इतने बड़े स्केल पे हो गया है. आप देखिए, वी सॉ विद द एग्जांपल ऑफ जनार्दन, like living here in India, he because knows English very well, he has that accent, US accent. So now that is helping Janardhan because he is sitting here, but with the communication, वो वहां की प्रॉब्लम, जो यूएस के लोग हैं, यूएस कस्टमर्स हैं, उनकी प्रॉब्लम सॉर्ट आउट कर रहा है. तो ये किस वजह से हुआ है? कम्युनिकेशन में इवोल्यूशन की वजह से, डेवलपमेंट की वजह से. तो यही आपको पहला रीजन है, टेक्नोलॉजी. जो टेक्नोलॉजी सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन. एज द टेक्नोलॉजी इज इंप्रूविंग, the process of the globalization is also like happening in very big amount, in very big way. So that's why the rapid integration is happening. Okay, so technology remains a critical element. There is no doubt that the invention of telegraph, telephone and the microchip in more recent times has revolutionized communication between different parts of the world. So when printing initially came into being, it laid the basis for the creation of nationalism. So also today we should expect that technology will affect the way we think of ourselves, our personal, but also our collective lives. So as the technology is like evolving, developing, as there has been like a boom in the technology, the process of globalization is also happening in a very large scale. प्रोसेस भी बड़े स्केल पे हो रही है, इंटीग्रेशन बहुत बड़े स्केल पे हो रहा है. जैसे पहले के टाइम में लाइक व्हेन प्रिंटिंग इनिशियली केम, इट लेड द बेसिस फॉर द क्रिएशन ऑफ नेशनलिज्म, है ना. लाइक टेक्नोलॉजी में उतना एवोल्यूशन नहीं था, लोग इतने डायरेक्टली जो मूवमेंट था इंटरनेशनली इतने बड़े स्केल में नहीं था. लोग अपनी एक पेरिफेरी में, एक टेरिटरी में, एक मतलब लिमिटेड थे. बट नाउ बिकॉज द टेक्नोलॉजी हैज इवॉल्व्ड, therefore even the companies are also transferring or outsourcing their business from one country to another country. That's why you know BPOs are being established throughout the world. आज BPOs बहुत बड़े स्केल पे एस्टैब्लिश हो रहे हैं. तो यही रीजन है इसका. नेक्स्ट, the abilities of ideas, capital, commodities and people to move from more easily from one part of the world to another. आज के टाइम में, अभी तो हमने टेक्नोलॉजी की बात की, अब जो एक मूवमेंट हो रहा है, और वो मूवमेंट जो है जिसमें like on बड़े big scale, the transportation, the communication, that is also helping the process of the globalization. How? Because now it is very much like easy, that movement of the commodities from one place to the another place, from one country to the another country. Now for instance, the movement of capital and commodities will most likely be quicker and wider than the movement of peoples across different parts of the world. So very interesting example. You might have seen in your previous classes, we discussed that a company or a newspaper from the UK, it outsources its business to India. The printing is done in India. The publishing or editing, everything is done here in India. Then by air, the newspapers are then delivered there in UK, and that's how the things go on. क्योंकि यहाँ पे उनको प्रिंटिंग और उनको जो रिक्वायरमेंट है एडिटिंग वगैरह की, वो इजीली कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन उनका लेस हो जाता है, तो उन्होंने अपना काम यहाँ पे इंडिया में आउटसोर्स कर दिया. तो मतलब यूके के अंदर कोई पर्सन जो है वो अगर न्यूज़पेपर रीड कर रहा है तो बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट है, उसकी सारी वो न्यूज़पेपर जो है वो छपा कहाँ पे, इंडिया में, न्यू दिल्ली में. उसको एडिट किसने किया? यहाँ पे बैठे एक पर्सन ने एडिट किया. न्यूज़पेपर्स यहाँ पे सारा कुछ प्रिंटिंग वगैरह सब कुछ यहाँ पे बाय एयर वहां पे जल्दी से मतलब डिलीवर कर दिया गया. तो इतने ऐसे ऐसे आपको एग्जांपल्स देखने को मिलते हैं. एंड बिकॉज द मूवमेंट हैज बिकम सो स्मूथ, दैट्स व्हाई दीज ऑल थिंग्स आर हैपनिंग, एंड these are the positive parts of the globalization. So these are the causes: the improvement in the technology, the improvement in the transportation, the improvement in the communication. That's why the process of globalization is happening in a very big scale. Now, globalization, however, does not emerge merely because of the availability of improved communications. What is important is for people in different parts of the world to recognize these interconnections with the rest of the world. Currently, we are aware of the fact that events taking place in one part of the world could have an impact on another part of the world. Very interesting. And as it is said that COVID first came in China, now the whole world is facing the crisis. So the same kind of example is given to you. The word bird flu or tsunami is not confined to any particular nation. It is just one from one place to another place, it just goes. So what is happening throughout the world? Because now the world is more interconnected. The movement or the communication is like very easy, very smooth. So if particular thing is happening in a country, the another country is also being affected by that. And that's very important to understand. These are a part of the globalization. Now, when major economic events take place, many times you might have seen in the news channels that there has been economic collapse or economic decisions are being taken in America, or US federal government is taking certain steps. So you can see the impact, economic impact on other countries also. So that's how, because now the world is more connected. So therefore the impact is felt throughout the world. So their impact is felt outside their immediate local, national, or regional government at the global level. So when any kind of major economic events happen in the country, the other country also gets affected by that. So these are the parts of the globalization. So what are the causes of the globalization? As we discussed that globalization also used to happen earlier also in historical time period, the flows of ideas, capital, commodities, and people. But what is the change currently? The change is very simple, because now technology has been improved. Now communication is more smooth, transportation is more smooth. So therefore the process, the globalization is happening in a very big scale, very large scale. The movement of these four things are in a very large scale, very wide scale. The speed and scale is huge. So that's how we can say that current globalization or contemporary globalization is from historical globalization process. It is different, because now we have more availability of various means which are helping the globalization process. Now everyone, next topic, and that is political consequences, the results of the globalization, and what are those? So what are the political consequences of the globalization? What are the results? What are the outcomes of the globalization, political outcomes? So one of the debates that has been generated as a consequences of contemporary process of globalization relates to its ongoing political impact. How does globalization affect traditional conceptions of state sovereignty? There are at least three aspects that we need to consider when answering these questions. Three aspects related to the political consequences of the globalization. And which are those? First, at the most simple level, globalization results in an erosion of state capacity. Globalization results in erosion of the state capacity. First dimension is this, that now the MNCs are coming, multinational corporations, and it is said that these multinational corporation has huge amount of money with them, trillions of dollars. They have the turnover, and these MNCs also affect the policies of the country. They affect the policies of a particular nation. So that is the power of these big MNCs. So what happening with the globalization? Erosion of state capacity. This is one dimension. We will also look the opposite dimension, where we see that still state matters, nation matters, the country has edge over other issues even in the globalization time period also. So at the most simple level, what we can say, globalization is results in an erosion of state capacity. How? That is the ability of government to do what they do. All over the world, the old welfare state is now giving way to a more minimalist state that performs certain core functions such as the maintenance of law and order and security of its citizens. Now, earlier it was said that the main responsibility of as we discussed in USSR in the Cold War chapter, that in the socialism, it is said that community must own everything, and on community's behalf, it is the government which owns everything, and that's how it distributes the resources. But now the world has become more capitalist, where everything is left on the market. There is a market economy, competition is there. So it is said that with globalization, the old welfare state is now changing to a minimalist state. It simply means that now the state or the government has just responsibility of maintaining the law and order and security of its citizens. This is the only things which a state does. However, it withdraws from many of its earlier welfare functions directed at economic and social well-being. So earlier, as you know, in our country also, the privatization happened. Earlier there was nationalization, but later on again, what happened when we followed the policy of liberalization in 1991, and currently also the privatization is happening, and everything is left on the market. The world is also following this kind of system. So it is saying that with globalization, one dimension is that now state has more it has changed from that welfare state to minimalist state. Its responsibilities are limited now, just to maintain the law and order and to provide that security to the citizens. In place of the welfare state, it has become it is the market that becomes the prime determinant. So in place of welfare state, in place of that state or government, now it totally put on the market. Now market decides in open competition. Through market, people are getting their share. So everything is left on the market. So it is the market that becomes the prime determinant of economic and social priorities. The entry and the increased role of multinational companies all over the world leads to a reduction in the capacity of governments to take decision on their own. So as the MNCs, as we have already discussed, that MNCs have huge amount of money, they are also affecting the policies of the government. And governments are also throughout the world making policies according to these big MNCs and according to the market orientation. At the same time, globalization, now this is the one dimension. Now what are the next dimensions? At the same time, globalization does not always reduce state capacity. The primacy of the state continues to be the unchallenged basis of political community. The old jealousies and rivalries between countries have not ceased to matter in world politics. The state continues to discharge its essential functions. So still, the another dimension is that state still has a lot of work which it does. Still, the state is at its primacy. Its primacy still continues to be unchallenged. Now, therefore, it has it discharges its duty, essential functions like maintaining law and order, national security, and consciously withdraws from certain domains from which it wishes to. States continues to be important. So it totally depends on the states, whether to interfere or not to interfere, or which subjects it wants to take or not. This is the another aspect of the globalization. Indeed, in some respects, state capacity has received a boost as a consequences of globalization. Now, even this dimension is showing you that with globalization, the capacity of the state has even got the boost. How? With enhanced technology available at the disposal of the state to collect information about its citizens. Now, with the improvement of the technology that happened due to the globalization, uh, because the invention happened in a country, now the technology has moved from one place to another place. So, therefore, with enhanced technology, now state is also has the power to get or collect the information about the citizens, so it can rule in a good manner, in a better manner. So with this information, the state is better able to rule, okay, not less able. So because the technology improved, because of the globalization, now state has much power. Now it can keep an eye on us. So that's how it will be able to rule in a good manner, better manner. Thus, states become more powerful than they were earlier as an outcome of the new technology. Now, this dimension is saying you that state has become more powerful even with the help of the new technology, with the process of the globalization. State has become more powerful because now it has got the ability or power of the technology, and with the help of the technology, it can rule in a better manner. So this is the another dimension. So that's how we saw the three dimension, the political consequences of the globalization. Through these three dimensions, we can understand these are the outcomes, political outcomes of the globalization. Now, everyone, next topic, and that is economic consequences. What are the economic consequences of the globalization? Now, dear students, we have come to our next topic, that is economic consequences. So, what are the economic outcomes? What are the results in terms of economic context of the globalization? So, as we already discussed that the integration of the economies of the world, it is the very important part or essential part of the globalization, and that we call commonly as the globalization. So, while everything may not be known about the economic effects of the globalization, this particular dimension shapes a large part of the content and direction of contemporary debates surrounding globalization. A part of the problem has to do with defining economic globalization itself. The mention of economic globalization draws our attention immediately to the role of international institutions like IMF and the WTO, and the role they play in determining economic policies across the world. So, IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, most of the countries of the world are member of these organizations, and these organizations, international organizations, play a very important role in the policy making. They provide like loans also on conditions, and those conditions are fulfilled by the countries, you know and they also guide and advises the countries to have better economic growth, better GDP growth rate. So in the current circumstances, in the current scenario, if we talk about the economic context of the globalization, then we can understand that even with the globalization, the international economic institutions, they are also like playing their role throughout the world. Yet globalization must not be viewed in such a narrow terms. Economic globalization involves many actors other than these international institutions. A much broader way of understanding of economic globalization requires us to look the distribution of economic gains. Who gets the most from the globalization and who gets less? Indeed, who loses from it? And that's very important. That in terms of economic context, the benefits, the countries or the companies, like which company or who get the most from the globalization and who get the less from the globalization, that is very important question. So what is often called economic globalization usually involves greater economic flows among different countries of the world. So if it is asked from you that what actually you mean by the economic globalization, it simply means the economic flows in a great manner in the current world throughout the countries is known as the economic globalization. And what do you mean by the economic flows? The same way, the flow of the commodities, the flow of many things from one place to another place, export, import, how countries are interdependent, even for the raw material, even for the technology also. So that's how the economic flows known as the economic globalization. So some of this is voluntarily and some forced by international institutions. And powerful countries, as we saw in the examples of the beginning of this chapter, this flow or exchange can take various forms: commodities, capital, people, and ideas. The four important parts. So the flow of commodities, the flow of capital also, very interestingly, a company of America is investing billions of dollars in India, or a company of India is spending billions of dollars in any African country or somewhere in Japan. And that's happening throughout the world. Movement of ideas, movement of people is also happening. So globalization has involved greater trade in commodities across the globe. The restrictions imposed by different countries on allowing the imports of other countries have been reduced, because because if the country thinks that they get the benefits, if they want to get the benefits of the globalization, then they have to remove the trade barriers if they earlier had put. So similarly, the restrictions on movement of capital across countries have also been reduced. So the movement is happening, movement of capital, movement of commodities is happening in a very wide scale, in a very big scale, and smoothly also. So in operational terms, it means that investors in the rich countries can invest their money in the countries other than their own. So that's why, these all big companies, whether the companies of Japan or whether the companies of America, they are investing in India or investing in Sri Lanka or investing in China or Vietnam or any other country. And they are even getting the benefit of it. So, including in developing countries where they might get better returns. So globalization, this process has provided this thing to the big companies. So now the movement or the flow of the capital is happening in a very large scale. Now next, the spread of the internet and computer related to services is an example of that. That's what the example which we saw, the example of Janardhan, that how globalization is happening or improving or helping the people throughout the world. But globalization has not led to the same degree of increase in the movement of people across the globe. Developed countries have carefully guarded their borders with visa price policies to ensure that citizens of other countries cannot take away the jobs of their own citizens. So nowadays, these kind of things are done so that the local employment generation also happens. And here an interesting cartoon is given to you yesterday and today. And here you can see in yesterday, a lady is telling to a child that to finish your dinner, there are people in China and India who are starving. It was earlier used to be said that there are a lot of people who starve and you just take it for granted, so finish your food. Now what today is happening? Finish your homework. There are people in China and India who are starving for your job. Very interesting. Means that now throughout the globe, like many engineers of India, they are working in America as an engineer. Even many doctors from India working in America or in UK or in Germany or in France as doctors. So now the dimension has changed. So throughout the globe with the process of the globalization, the employment generation is also happening in a very large scale. However, now the countries are also making certain laws, regulations so that they can protect um, the local employment generation also. So this is happening throughout the globe. These are the economic outcomes, consequences. Next topic and remaining part of this topic we're going to read in our next class, all of you. Thank you very much.